All right. Welcome, you guys. We're so glad you're here. There are several of us from the seed team on this call. So if you're on the seed team, maybe just give a little wave so people can see who you are. Perfect. You'll hear from some of us. Ashley did a little emoji wave. She'll be on later. Yeah, we're so glad you guys are here. This is our first official seed webinar. We're hoping to do these quarterly, and really the biggest purpose of these webinars is to welcome our online community into the seed network. There are several things that we do locally in Knoxville, Tennessee. So if you're in Knoxville, Tennessee ever, we'd love to have you at some of those events. We have a book club that we host. We have a thing called Global and Gathered, which is for international women. So we'd love to have you locally, but really these webinars are to connect with you guys who live far from us, see your faces, and get to engage in some really cool conversations together. So tonight we're talking about one of my favorite things, which is mutuality and missions. And we have with us tonight Aaron and Matt, who are very fun. They are co-hosts of a podcast called Missio Pop. If you haven't listened to it, I'll drop it in the chat box soon, but it is pretty funny. They're pretty funny guys. We can't let it go to their heads, but I think they're pretty funny. But they also take really complex missional topics and they boil it down so that everyday people like me and you can, sorry, I'm multitasking, letting people in. So that everyday people like me and you can engage better with our global neighbors. And so we're really grateful for the work you guys do, Matt and Aaron. Thank you guys for being here today. I'll just give like a quick little rundown of who you guys are. And if there's anything you want to add when you get started, feel free. But we'll start with Dr. Matt Cook. So Matt has spent 3 years living and working in Peru. He now lives in Henderson, Tennessee with his wife and 2 children. This is hard to do while I'm letting people into the room. Okay. He also is the assistant professor of global missions and world religions at Freed Hardeman University in West Tennessee. And he has his PhD in Christian missions and world religions from Southern Baptist Seminary. Sorry, y'all. I'm really having to go back and forth to let people in. Dr. Aaron Wheeler is someone that I've gotten to work closely with the past several years. He is our cross-cultural facilitator for Seed International. So he does a lot of our cross-cultural trainings for people that are going on trips with us or for interns. He's also helped us develop a lot of content surrounding missions, especially in the area of mutuality, which we'll talk more about soon. Aaron spent 12 years working for an organization in East Asia. He has his master's degree in intercultural studies from Wheaton College and a PhD in intercultural studies from Biola University. He's also currently a professor of ministry at Ozark Christian. So that is his like full-time job. And then he works with Seed on the side. And he lives in Joplin, Missouri with his wife, Danielle, who's just a lovely angel, and their 4 children. So thank you guys so much for being on here today. I'm going to pass it over to you guys, let you take it away. And then for everyone listening, we will have a Q&A portion at the end of this after Matt and Aaron get done kind of walking us through everything. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box anytime during this call. You can also submit them to me, like just to me over the chat box if you don't want everyone to see it. If you want me to ask it for you anonymously, there's been a few people that have emailed in some questions that I'm going to ask anonymously for them. So feel free to do that too if you don't want to like unmute yourself and talk. So yeah, Aaron, I'm going to pass it to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Abby. Let's dive in. Matt Cook, how are you this evening?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Good, good.
That's my one question, kind of catching up with you. Have you learned to like coffee yet? I'm not sure you can be
I don't
missions
know.
world if you don't like coffee.
Yeah, I don't know that that'll ever be a thing. I think we just gotta take that off the plate of possibilities. But yes, I'm glad Matt brought that up. That was one of our points of contention in our podcast series was the fact that Matt likes bad things. Not only is that coffee, but it would include the Pittsburgh Steelers and the West Virginia Volunteers. So
Wow,
I'll
you
forgive you.
butchered that, seeing that
Yeah.
it's the West Virginia Mountaineers and the Tennessee Volunteers. Nice try at humor, Aaron.
I don't like college sports.
Gone to
So
its head already.
yes. It's good to be here. This feels like a familiar space, like we're back in our old place. This is fun. So, our topic for this evening, as Abby so eloquently introduced us with, is missions and mutuality. How do these two things work together? So, Matt, I feel like we got to start this out just defining our terms because mutuality isn't necessarily one of those, common sense ideas and concepts. So start us out, Matt, with what is the technical definition, and then we'll work on more of a missional concept.
Yeah, it's obviously not a word that most of us use every day, right? Mutuality. Simply, it's the sharing of a feeling, action, or relationship between two or more parties. There you go. Book definition, right?
That's perfect. That's perfect. And that's, sharing is, I think, the key part of it. It's two people coming together in a space in which sharing occurs, but where it comes into missions and where it comes into what we want to talk about tonight, how I would define it as a missional concept or as a mission strategy, would be the strategy of mission work focused on true partnerships of equality with a high value on reciprocity and exchange. So I feel like I'm breaking the rules here, Matt. Even in my definition, I'm bringing in new words and other things. I promise we'll get there. But outside of that kind of technical definition, Matt, how would you help us out in helping us understand what that really means and what that's like?
For me, it's as simple as saying, okay, it's really tempting when we think about cross-cultural missions to think somehow I've got the answers that I'm going to solve problems. This is about me. And what we're doing is utterly failing at recognizing that I don't have all the answers, that I'm certainly not the savior, but I'm missing out on the partnerships that I get to enjoy with people from across the globe, and then acknowledging that we are equals here, right? And so I have just as much or more to learn in many cases than I have to offer. And so it's just the acknowledgement that as Westers, for many of us who are Westerners, it's acknowledging that we're not the ones who have this figured out. We're going into this and we're working together with people. We're sharing in this mission, not just us doing it for others. We're sharing in it.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I would add to that is in this, as you mentioned, this humble spirit, this humble approach to this task of global discipleship that we get from, the Great Commission, Matthew 28, this call to be a part of what God is doing around the world. I think one of the main things that we've missed and we've lacked as we've approached this is the humility of recognizing this is done through the power of the Holy Spirit, that this isn't a man-made thing. It's not human powered. It's not, the latest strategy or the latest, endeavor that we figured out or some kind of trick to make these things occur, but recognizing that as we are empowered by the Holy Spirit and we go to places where the Holy Spirit has already been, that the power lies in that and not in us. And so this is, as you can see up on your title screen there, a kind of a critique of how Western missions has been done, especially in the last season of kind of evangelical missiology, that we're trying to be a bit of a corrective measure in this last. And so, Matt, what are we talking about? What is it about what missions has been kind of in the last 100, 200 years even, that we're
Yeah.
saying we've learned a lot, we've done a lot, but we also recognize there's things that need to change?
Yeah. And I hinted at it a few minutes ago. It's this idea that we go in and and it sounds terrible even to say it, Aaron, but it's been the attitude of many Western missionaries. Let's go in and fix their mess,
Hmm.
which is clearly problematic in so many ways, and it's ethnocentric. So yeah, that's what the attitude that we've gone into. And as you describe it, this is missionally negative, right? We're not going with on positive terms. We're going because things are bad and we're going to fix it.
Yeah. And, if we are willing to be honest, if we're willing to, kind of hang our dirty laundry a bit, we have to recognize that a lot of these problems begin at the recruitment level. I mean, a lot of us who've been involved in missions, we have kind of our gritty origin story where, it was a conference, it was some kind of missions presentation, it was a thing that we heard some missionary speak where there was some kind of call, there was some kind of, almost like a second conversion moment where there was music playing and a convicting message that was our beginning point and was our origin into these things. And if we're honest about what that moment was and what was being communicated, a lot of it centered around these things, which is, first of all, like you said, a negative attitude that there's bad things happening somewhere. There is suffering on a deep level. The best word we could use for it is to say there was a need. And what we need to do about that need is fix it. What we need to do is go to this place, fix their issues, dive into this problem with, fists flailing of all the things we're going to do to make this better. And then what turns the screw on it is if we don't, no one else will. If we are God's only solution to this problem, if we don't step up and if we don't make the sacrifice and if we don't go to this place, no one else will. And so every solution kind of rises and falls on our willingness to participate, on our willingness to say yes, on our willingness to be sent. And God's, only solution to this is our ability.
Yeah. And for me, it wasn't so much a single moment, but everything you just described happened over, a period of a year or so, where just slowly there was this nagging feeling of everything you just described. It wasn't a single moment. It's like this nagging feeling of something's got to be done. And for me, it was all of my classmates in the undergrad level, all of my classmates, they're going to go do this in the Bible Belt. Somebody's got to go to these places where there is a need that needs to be fixed. And so just over a year, that gradually grew in me. And I'm thankful for the ways and the people who worked in my life to propel me in some sense to cross-cultural missions. But our motives are rarely pure,
Yeah.
or as good as they should be.
Yeah. Motives are a tricky thing because even in this, negative missiology, this bad things are happening, this place is suffering, we have to fix it or nobody else will. There's even a layer underneath that I think the world of Western missions needs to recognize that a lot of this motivation into solving problems is a need to feel important, is a need to feel like I matter, that I'm going to do something that is hard, that is difficult, that is going to come with trial. And if we're, again, going to air our dirty laundry and be honest about what's happening, a need to be recognized for someone willing to do hard things, a need to be on that missions pedestal, to be a shining star and a shining example, because at the end of the day, I'm not finding satisfaction in simply being a child of God. I'm not finding wholeness in simply the love of Christ, that I need to be important. I need to be a part of something important that matters. In our best terminology, I need to be making a difference.
Mm.
And if I'm not doing those things, then who am I?
Yeah. I think about the cross-cultural missionaries I know right now. I want to honor them, but I acknowledge in my own in my own experience, those being honored for being a cross-cultural missionary, there's something that feels good about that.
Oh, yeah.
Because people are, and there is truth in that people are sacrificing to do this, but there's something about like, hey, I am doing, look at me. Look
Yep.
what I'm doing by my own power and by my own sacrifices. And all of this is not to say that people aren't sacrificing. It's just a corrective to remind us it's not about me.
Yeah.
Because when it becomes about me, then it's going to be really hard to demonstrate what we're talking about tonight, and that's mutuality.
Yeah. And so, if those critiques exist and, we want to mention them, but again, with a spirit of love and grace, as none of us have this figured out, we're all just trying to do our best, that, what is the solution? What do we do otherwise? What does it look like for mutuality to happen? And so I want to kind of give us two categories for these, which is the mutuality as sent and the mutuality as received. What does it look like for mutuality to be on the part of the one being sent? How would you describe what that looks like?
So it looks like, well, let's keep it real simple, Aaron. It looks like Jesus, right? So
Yeah.
that's the Sunday school answer, but it looks like humility, complete dependence on the Spirit. But I would even say complete dependence on people in that culture where we're living, that I'm not doing this on my own. So I'm just going because I'm saying, how can I help? Now, I think we do want to say, Aaron, it's easy for us in 2025 to say, look at all the ways that so many people have failed in this. Boy, there have been a lot of faithful cross-cultural workers who've demonstrated the way of Jesus so beautifully. So this
Yeah.
is not a
Yeah.
knock on all those who've done this well. Just acknowledging that it hasn't always been that way.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's I think this mutuality of being sent is, a best case scenario, like when you have to try to move. You've got your moving van coming and you've got boxes lined up and you've got, all these needs when it comes to getting yourself out of one living space. And there's kind of a person you hope shows up and there's a person you hope doesn't show up. The one who you don't want to show up is the one who's going to come and start, making calls and telling things like it is and where what needs to go where and what's in what box and ordering people around and having their solutions to everything. You kind of hope that that person doesn't show up. Who you do hope shows up, the one who's like, how can I help? I'm here, I'm available, I want to be a part of this. You tell me what needs to happen to make this move occur. And so part of that could be, I don't have a plan. And so I need you to help me make one. But if that's the case, it's because you're asking for it. It's because you're recognizing the need and helping people fit where they need to fit. But it is that desire to adapt, it's desire to assimilate, it's desire to have that humble submission to say, I'm here to serve, I'm here to help, I'm here because I feel called by Christ to be in this place, but let's figure this out together. Let's work, ultimately in a way of saying, you're the one who understands this place better than I ever will. You're the one who's lived in this place your whole life. You're the one who understands the minute details that I'm going to miss. And so I want to serve. I want to help. I want to be a part of good, positive things. Help me see what that looks like.
Yeah. And that takes a lot of humility to
Yeah.
say, please tell me what to do. Please help me understand. And I love your illustration about moving. When we came back from Peru, I'll never forget. We kind of moved around for a little while, and then we bought a house and settled in Henderson. And from our sponsoring church, there must have been, it was too many people. There were like 40 people who show up. And I remember unloading the truck, and it only took like 10 minutes. But I remember literally just standing at the doorway and like pointing different ways as all these people walked in. Nobody was trying to like tell us. They just came and they were like, I'm here, tell me what to do. And so that's we didn't talk about this ahead of time. That's a great illustration and is meaningful to me because I've been in the place of humble servants just there to help, and how in the at the end of the day, how humbling that is to say, oh wow, like look how these folks came and served, and then that makes me want to live in mutuality even as
Yep.
the receiver in that case, and when the time comes to return
Yep.
the favor in some way.
Yep. Those are the things you're going to remember. So when the call comes out the other direction, it's going to
That's
look a
right.
lot different. But mutuality also isn't just on the one being sent, it's on the one who receives. There is the other side of these things. And so, what does it look like to be on the other side? I mean, some of it we mentioned in this metaphor, but unpack it for us a little bit as well.
Yeah, I think if we're going to run with the whole moving thing, imagine you're moving, you've shown up, and all these people are there to help you move in. You're not barking orders, it's still done humbly, right? It's leading, you're pointing the directions that people are supposed to go. You're trying to be efficient in that. You're being a good steward of resources and time, but it's a humble, grateful leader, right? Join us as we follow Christ in this place. We can work together here, and it's still it's leading though, but it's done humbly.
Yeah. And it's that humility requires the ability to recognize you have needs, recognizing that you do need to receive, recognizing that there is, yeah, just a humility to say, I want help. I want people around me. I want this to be a bigger thing than just what I'm able to do. And, we've all met people who struggle with that, and we all struggle with that ourselves. I'm sure in our, moving metaphor, there's people who are like, I don't want strangers in my house. I don't want people I don't know handling my stuff. I can take care of it. I'm a big boy, kind of thing that happens. And that's a fear of humility on the other side. And so recognizing as you're part of this global body, as you're part of the hands and feet of Christ, that there are seasons to be sent and there are seasons to receive. And if this all goes well, we'll be able to see the beauty of humility on both sides. So let's move on then to another key term that we talked about here, which is reciprocity. But in reciprocity, we've got to do a little bit of background work because there's some bigger issues at play in that concept and in that idea. One of them that you see up there on your screen is the idea of collectivism. Matt, you're an overeducated white dude. Define what collectivism means.
So maybe the best way to define it is to define the opposite. So, as Westerners, we are individualists. It's all about me. And we don't, not like in a selfish way, but it's all about my personal identity and my living out my dreams and doing my thing. And I'm not so concerned about the group. And so I'm going to launch out on my own. It's about the individual, not the group. And so collectivism says it's all about the group. Your identity is not your personal identity. Your identity comes from the group. So my purpose as an individual is not to fulfill my own personal identity, it's to meet the needs of my group. And that is not the way that those of us who grew up in a Western context usually think.
Yeah, we are, the United States is a great example. To nerd out here for a second, Geert Hofstede, a Dutch sociologist going back about 50 years, created a quantitative system to measure exactly how extreme countries are in these ideas. And in his research, he determined that the United States is not only highly individualistic, but the most individualistic country in the history of humanity. So, we're number one kind of thing, USA. And that's going to skew how we see things. It's going to skew our worldview, and especially when it comes to these ideas and how we approach missions. And that becomes a big problem because the vast majority of the world, especially historically, has been collectivist, has seen things in a group sense. And so if you are a Western person and you're feeling the call of God to go somewhere, it's, statistically very, very likely you're going to go to a collectivist environment. And so in that world, you're going to have a different set of values. You're going to have a different set of what it means to, a different idea of what it means to solve problems. You're going to
Yeah,
have a different idea for, how do we fix messes that do exist? How do we meet needs? And the collectivist concept of these things and what they look like is going to be different. And if we're going to love and serve and be incarnational like Christ is, we're going to have to know how that works.
maybe the best way I know to illustrate collectivism is to think about in other cultures, I think about Peru in particular, how in a single household, maybe even a single apartment, sometimes four generations will live in the same apartment together and they're all working together, taking care of each other. In our culture, we look down on that.
Yeah.
Like you don't live with your parents or your grandparents unless you absolutely have to, because it is your responsibility to strike out on your, not strike out, but to go out on your own, to make it on your own, to show that you are that you've been successful. I can think of a family on the first floor of our apartment building in Peru. They owned a couple of restaurants. They were not poor, but it was four generations in a single apartment because that's the way they chose to live because they were collectivists. I think about my wife's great grandmother. She won't listen to this, so I can talk about her. She is in terrible health. She needs to move in with my in-laws, but she refuses because she's going to live on her own. What is that? That's rugged individualism, and that doesn't happen in other cultures.
Nope. And they would be horrified to see
Yes.
And so, where this takes a part of missions and our approach or strategically to how we fix problems is that one of the biggest values in collectivism is harmony. Easy way to define harmony is everything is in balance as it should be. And so, problem solving is one of these ideas that collectivists want to see harmoniously achieved, to use weird language. And what that kind of looks like, practically is a phrase we're familiar with, which is scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. That, kind of in the moving metaphor we did before, that yeah, I'll help you move one weekend with the idea that there's going to be a day in the future where you need this too. And so I'll show up on the other side of this. So it's the idea that when we serve knowing that you also will serve me, that the balance will always happen. There'll be a time where things are always in this level playing field and no one's above or below each other, but we're in this place of equality and harmony. And so that kind of goes against some Western sensibilities. It kind of goes against how we do things because, we love the no strings attached approach to service, that I just do it because it's good. I just do it because it's right. But to expect anything in return, to expect that you're going to have your back scratched someday is considered, selfish and from the wrong motivations. But collectivists aren't going to see it that way.
Yeah. And the reality is, though we claim to do things just for altruistic motives, this exists in our culture too, right? Do
Yeah.
you work for free? No. right? Does
I
a
feel like I
mission
do sometimes, but
does
yeah,
it go does yeah, we are in ministry and private Christian universities.
yeah,
Uh, did you go to the mission field expecting to receive nothing in return, no pay? Well, no, of course we do things
yeah,
expecting some sort of reciprocity, right?
yeah, yeah. One of the ways where I saw this happen was in what I would say was my first real missions experience. Um, I was in college. I think I was a sophomore, and I got to do the classic missions trip, which was go build a house in Mexico. And we did the thing. We, drove down to Texas, crossed the border, did the whole stuff. And I remember as we were in the process of doing this, laying the foundation, setting up these walls, a bunch of, 19, 20-year olds who have no construction experience, putting this thing together, that what really weirded me out was the dad of this family who was going to live in this house insisted on helping. He insisted, brought his own tools. He was there every step of the way. He was engaged in the process of this house being built. And, my 19-year-old self didn't love that. It's kind of like, dude, we're doing this for you. We're doing this as a service for you. Kind of, I even think back, it's like, get out of my way. I'm doing this nice thing on your behalf. And not really understanding what was happening in that moment. And when I look back on it now, it makes so much more sense where this wasn't supposed to be something where he just, passively receives a good work upon him in his value system, in his way of seeing the world. He needed to be engaged in it. He needed to be a part of it. He needed to understand that this was his work too. That's how he feels honored. That's how he feels like he has dignity and respect in the community. To know that this wasn't just a good work that he received from someone else, but that he was engaged. He was a part of it. He had that place of equality in the midst of this good work being done. And I was way too young to understand these things at the time. But looking back on it now, that's just a small picture of the ways that sometimes we approach problem solving can the grain culturally in the places that we want to serve.
And I think deep down inside, we this is built into us because we're part of families. Like we understand how families work. And while I would do anything for my family, there's this understanding that we're just here for each. We got each other's backs.
Yeah.
And we're yes, there are gonna be times where I'm serving, but we're gonna be standing side by side serving each other. And there's gonna be times when I need a little bit more than you do. I mean, I like it. I prefer to take care of myself, but we know that this is what family's about, and therefore this is what the family of God is about. We've
Yeah.
got each other's backs. We're standing side by side, working together. Sometimes I'm able to do a little more, sometimes a little less, but we're doing this together as equals.
Yeah. And where this is kind of leading is in this idea that you see up on your screen there of reciprocity. Because reciprocity, as it's defined there as the practice of exchanging things with others for mutual benefit, especially privileges granted by one country or organization to another. And so, if you'll allow me, I can nerd out on this a little bit with the book you see there, which is a book called The Gift by Marcel Mauss, who was a French sociologist in the 1920s. And he had this experience where he was in these kind of American Pacific Northwest, just off of like the Oregon, Washington coast of some island countries over there, where he saw this idea lived out in kind of this potlatch practice, where there was all these different islands where people would, just kind of travel around to each other. And in this midst of traveling, getting to know other tribes, getting to know other groups, they would do this process of gift exchange where I would bring you a gift and then later you would bring me a gift. And then because, we needed to keep this exchange equal, they keep doing this over and over again in this constant process of gift exchange. And he thought, at first this is just really weird, but then later understood what was happening, where this reciprocity was as I give you and as you give me, as I scratch your back and you scratch mine, we're doing more than just getting stuff done. We're doing more than just exchanging gifts because it's nice and cool and there's a holiday, so let's do it. It was at the end of it building relationship, because the metaphor I would use for reciprocity is it's kind of like, a needle and thread. When you've got two separate pieces of fabric and you're trying to draw them together, you need this needle to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with a string attached to make the thing united. And reciprocity is that idea that as we go back and forth in serving one another, in exchanging gifts with one another, the best of what we have and the best of what you have, that we're building relationship, we're becoming united. We are that thing that Jesus always wanted us to be, which was a people united in his name. And so as we cross cultures, as we cross nations, as we do, language learning and all the stuff that it requires in missions, that is what's happening underneath it all, is the body of Christ is being united together, and the beauty that occurs when that happens.
I fell asleep while you were nerding out there. I don't,
That's
but
okay.
I
Most
was,
people did.
it
I'm
was
used to
good.
that.
That's great stuff. Um, and I think most of us at some point have experienced that sort of thing. I don't know, maybe it's a side note, but if you've ever noted in other cultures, the whole gift giving thing is much more common, and sometimes we're not very good at that.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not very good at the receiving end of this. Sometimes we like to be the giver, and reciprocity says I'm going to accept the fact that others can give me something too. And so, yeah, I know I need to grow in that. It's easier. We like to receive at Christmas time, but especially when we think that somehow we've got the answers and we have it better off, that we struggle with the gift giving thing and the receiving thing rather.
Yeah. I mean, we even have, proverbs about it. It is better to, and instead of recognizing, it's best to do both, because the point is not just giving and the point is not just receiving. The point is relationships and the community of Christ being the body that's knit together like it is. And this is quite different, reciprocity, quite different than charity. I don't want charity to be a bad word, but it has some consequences. Matt, what would you say are the unintended consequences of charity?
Mm. And you can even see it in pictures sometimes, but the giver is in an elevated position above the receiver. And so if you see these social media posts after short-term mission trips, and it's always the Westerner giving something, what's going on here? Well, they're trying to show, maybe not intentionally, but they're demonstrating, look here, I'm the giver, they're the receiver, and this is charity. And so now all of a sudden I'm in an elevated position, and I'm the one, again, fixing the problem.
Yeah. And it's especially in these collectivist cultures where honor and shame are so important. It's not an exchange of shame, it's or of honor. It's not a sharing of honor. It's not a spreading of honor around to elevate the whole group. It's that in a charity environment, honor stays in one place forever and only. The one who's above and the one who's giving is the one who maintains that honor. And in a collective environment, especially, that's going to be offensive, and it's going to chafe, and it's going to have long-term relational consequences. And I think this, conversation on mutuality and what it means to give and receive in a missional context is especially important historically, because where we are right now in the big picture of, what's happened since, this last weekend as we celebrated Easter, what's happened in the 2000 years since, is that the global church is in a place that it never has been before. What am I talking about, Matt? What does that look like?
Well, what we're saying here is that the Western church is in decline, and in the global South, churches are thriving. And so if Western churches, perhaps we could even say, if they're going to grow again, we're going to have to depend on and live in mutuality with those from the global South. Maybe the clearest example of this is, as I'm assuming several of us are from the United States of America, the Western church in Europe has um, their decline has, we're kind of behind them a few years, but their decline is significant. In thriving churches in Europe, usually what is causing that is immigration.
Hmm.
It's people from the global South who are reviving European churches, and it's a great example of what's the hope of the European church? Perhaps it's immigrants from the global South.
Yeah. And that idea of a, no longer Western centered church, um, is a thing that as we move forward, we're going to have to get a whole lot more comfortable with.
Mm.
Because where we have historically been in a position of superiority, of strength, of resources, is going away day by day. And that's not just bad news. That's not just simply because, the church in the West is cratering in culture and, negative, 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 suffering bad. It's also because the Holy Spirit is doing an incredible thing in the global South, and revolt and, churches exploding and just things that, you know, have rarely been seen in the history of the church are occurring in exciting and wonderful and amazing ways. And I would encourage everybody listening to take some time to go out and research some of this stuff. There's great statistics, there's great pictures of encouragement, there's incredible stories of what God is doing around the world. That's part of what frustrates me so much about our negative missiology, where we're like, here's bad things, here's suffering, go fix it, is that we don't have to just simply look at things on the negative side. There's so much to be encouraged about. There's so much to just say, hey, here's God doing new work, that we, if we take the time, can go and look at and go and see. And, there's a link in the chat right now about the Lausanne people, and I may have terribly mispronounced that name, but the Lausanne group and what they've done in their own research and the ways that Christianity is growing in the global South and what they're calling this future of polycynic Christianity, which is this fancy way of saying that Christianity no longer has a single base or single position of strength and power, but instead, in God's incredible work of bringing his truth to the world, that we're going to have to work from multiple places, and we're going to have cross-cultural teams, and we're going to have to look at other values and other cultures and other languages and other colors to really make this work, because the center of Christianity has shifted and will only continue to do so. And that is a wonderful, encouraging reality, not something to fear or be ashamed about.
Yeah, and maybe the simplest way that that's been stated is mission is going to be from everywhere to everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's something incredibly freeing and beautiful about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm Matt, I'm sure you've gone through this as well, but one of the weird things that happens when you eventually come back home, when you've had your season in this place, is that you so wish that like you could bring your two groups together, the group where you live and the group where you serve, and the people who look like you and talk like you love and appreciate them, but you also miss the people that were in that other place, and the way that they saw Christ, and the way that they understood him, and said, what a gift it would be if I could have you both at the same table and let you talk to each other and share what you've learned, and share the Christ that you see. And it's, to me, what gets me jazzed is to realize that's happening and will only continue to happen into the future, as in the beauty of what Christ is doing around the world, that we're finally getting to a place where we're sitting together as equal brothers and sisters in Christ and saying, let's do this. Let's be a part of what God's doing. Let's come together and make this happen.
Yeah, absolutely. What time do we need to finish here?
I think we got like what, 5 minutes?
Okay. So recently I heard
It's not
Alan.
our hour and a half podcast like we used to do.
Right. Oh yeah, I know. Alan Howe from Mission Resource Network. He shared these. He was talking about short-term missions, but I think it fits this conversation about mutuality, because for a lot of our people who are listening, they may think of missions primarily from the perspective of short-term missions, right?
Yeah.
And so three images that I think help us to think through mutuality in short-term missions is, number one, a big table. So a big table, a big towel, and a big treasure. So a big table says, when we participate in short-term missions, we're all seated at the table together. And as people on this short-term mission trip, we are in guest mode.
Yeah.
And when I recognize that I'm the guest, that means I am not in charge. The guest is never in charge, right? And so big table, and I'm a guest at that table. Number two, big towel, which means imagine like this big towel and we're all holding a piece of it, which means we serve together, from the image of Jesus, of course, in John chapter 17. So we're all, or John 13 rather. So we're all learning to serve together as we hold this big towel, and then a big treasure that we are sharing together, right? None of us have the corner on this. And so we get to listen to one another, share stories of why Jesus matters. And I think especially as Westerners, we get to grow and increase our understanding of how God is at work in the world when we recognize that we're all participating and sharing in this big treasure that comes from Jesus. And so big table, big towel, big treasure, that helped me think through this a little more clearly.
It sounds like something a good Church of Christ preacher would say. 3 points, all with the letter T.
Oh, I hate alliteration, and as I was saying that, I noted that it was alliteration. So my apologies.
No worries. We're going to close with two quick biblical examples of what this is and what it looks like. The first one's there on your screen. That's 2 Timothy chapter 4, 9 through 13, where Paul, as our prototypical missionary, the guy who traveled across the Roman Empire, planting churches left and right, the one we're all trying to model after, that he understood this in that he, with the people he was working with and the people he was serving, admitted his own need. As it says there, Timothy, please come as soon as you can. Demas has deserted me because he loves the things of life and has gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia. Titus has gone to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Bring Mark with you when you come, for he will be helpful to me in my ministry. I sent Tychus to Ephesus. When you come, be sure to bring the coat I left with Carpus at Troas, and also bring my books, and especially my papers. He was a huge nerd like us, Matt, and I find some comfort in that. But what he was doing here was admitting that he had needs and that the people that he was serving um, could meet those. He had the humility to say, I may be the apostle here, but we need to do this work together. I have needs and I'm willing to admit them. And then the second biblical image is Revelation 7, that classic every tribe, tongue, and nation thing that we use at our missionary pep rallies a lot. To realize that that's where we're going. And the good news is some of it's happening now. That, I love hearing stories of my friends. These are part of these international teams that, they're led by Brazilians or they're led by Cubans or they're led by Ugandans. And they're saying, I'm just here to serve. I'm not in charge. We're figuring this out together. We're working through our own cross-cultural issues as a team because it's complicated, but also fun, the mess and beauty of the magic of culture coming together to be, this Revelation 7 picture in our missions, in our work, in our teams, in what God's doing. Like you said, so well before, everybody going to everybody. I think is where we begin to see these things already happen.
Yeah, every tribe, tongue, and nation is not some image of maybe what could be.
Yeah.
It's an image of what is, and what most certainly will be for all eternity. And so we might as well buy into it now, and not somehow think that we're the ones who are going to make it happen. No, God will. This is how it is, and this is how God will make it happen. We get to participate in it, and it's beautiful. I love what you said about humility. Like, it's acknowledging I cannot do this on my own.
Yeah.
My last story, I was on a short-term mission trip over spring break with college students, and I got attacked by a bear and hurt my knee. Actually, that's not true. I was playing a game with college students and I fell and I hurt my knee, which is not as fun of a story. And I had to be, this is so embarrassing. I had to be put in a wheelchair at the airport to get to our luggage, and a college student wheeled me along in a wheelchair. Of course, they found that to be really, really funny. But
Yeah.
really, over the past month, is what I've learned is I can't do this on my own. Like, I had my poor 12-year-old son for a couple of weeks had to put my socks on. Like, it's so embarrassing. But it's just a small image of the life that we live and of the way that we work in community with one another. There, we've got to acknowledge that sometimes we can't put our own socks on.
Yeah.
And I need my brothers and sisters in Christ from across the globe to help me and to do the things that I think I can do on my own, but in reality, I most definitely cannot.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a good word, Matt. And I think that's a good place for us to end our time. So, Abby, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know we have some Q&A. We have some engagement from our people here. Are you ready, Matt? Are you ready for some questions?
I guess.
I'm going to let you answer them all.
You guys are awesome. Thank you guys so much for your wisdom and just for your years of experience in education studying this. It's really, I've heard this kind of spiel several times, and every single time I walk away with something new. So thank you. I'm actually going to pass it over to my coworker, Ashley. If you guys haven't met her yet, she'll unmute herself and kind of take over the Q&A session of our time together.
Thank you, Abby. Good evening, everybody. Matt, Aaron, thank you guys so much for chance to honest conversation, honest listen to one another, and yeah, thank you guys for your hard work. For those who don't know me, yes, I work with Abby with Seed International. The fancy title is Director of Cultural Integration. I will not explain that, but if anybody would like my job description, I'm sure I could send it in an email. Um, Abby has compiled a few questions that people have had for us. Um, Matt, Aaron, you guys feel ready? You
We're
kind of
ready. Yeah.
okay. Abby, you want me to just go ahead and read What we've got compiled here? Okay.
Yes, there's been several people that have sent them in like anonymously in the chat and then also over email. So if you guys think of anything, you're welcome to unmute yourself during this time and ask, or you can also submit it to directly to me and Ashley and we can ask it out loud.
Yeah. Okay. So, as someone who really believes in this model, how do you sell sorry, the word model of I can't say the word, but you know what I'm saying. Correct.
Reciprocity.
Thank you.
There you
That
go.
one. How do you celebrate and encourage people that have already decided to go on mission trips while attempting to provide education and a different perspective? Um, yeah.
So if I'm hearing that right, short-term mission trips are context. We're going there to educate. And how do we do that well? Am I hearing
Mhm.
that right? Okay.
I'll also share them in the chat box if anyone wants to follow along there too.
Okay. Um, I think I'll let Matt give his 2 cents here. I am not in any way, shape, or form against short-term missions. I know that that was kind of a thing for a while in the world of missiology of like hating on short-term missions, and that, I think there's some reasons for that, and there's some ways that we should not do them. But I think generally speaking, short-term missions are a critical part of the missions movement. Part of that is because, some of the research I had to do for my dissertation, I had to interview dozens and dozens of missionaries. And every time I did, I asked them their story of how they got here. And, I don't have hard numbers here, but 90% or more, they started out with a short-term missions trip. It was a week here, a week there. That was the beginning of God's movement and calling in their life. And so I think these little trips are really important to the greater scope of how God is working in people's hearts and minds. And so I'm in big favor of short-term trips as long as they're done well. And so I would say if you're going to go on a trip, um, kind of like we talked about before, don't go because you're going to fix something. Don't go because you're going to correct something. Don't go because you're going to do something that no one else is capable of doing. Go to learn. Go to, like Matt said, be a good guest. Go to just get a bigger perspective of what God's doing in other places around the world. And so go with this idea that I don't have the answers, but I'm going to see some stuff, that I don't have it all figured out, but I want to learn what you're already doing. I want to see what the Holy Spirit is already a part of in your place. And people may balk at that a little bit with how much money this costs and how much investment, but I think perspective is worth investing in. And so as you go to just, as Jesus says, come and see, I think that there is a lot to be learned and a lot to be gained in the midst of that happening.
Maybe I can answer this question in a different way because I'm reading it a little bit differently, but this way we'll answer two questions. I may be seeing in this, how do we celebrate and encourage people who've already done this and at the same time attempting to provide a different perspective about mutuality? Maybe mutuality wasn't their emphasis. How do we celebrate them? And maybe that wasn't the intention of the question. Either way, we're answering two questions. I'm going to just celebrate what God has done. Whether it was done well, whether it was done with mutuality, we can celebrate the good things God has done while still offering a different perspective and helping people to think through things a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Thank you both. That was good. Next question, and Abby, you can drop it in. How do we help bring mission committees who have never had a focus of mutuality up to speed? For them, theirs has made progress, but the mindset overall still feels very charitable rather than reciprocal.
Oh, missions committees.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's as simple as having this exact conversation that we've just had and offering training solutions, getting members of missions committees into webinars like this. And it's just education. I don't know of any shortcut around that other than having these conversations. Maybe Aaron knows the solution, but
I
I
certainly
do this.
I certainly do not. But I mean, part of me wonders, are these committee members going on the trips themselves? I think that's a place of rebuke, honestly. That it's one thing to sit on a board and make decisions about how money is spent and who gets what and these kind of things. But like, I don't love the board model of a lot of how we set up our churches and our strategies. I want, if you're going to be a decision maker and be a leader, you got to have skin in the game and you got to be a part of the work. And so if you're going to be on a board, like, you should be going on these trips. You should be seeing and experiencing these things yourself. And so if in these short-term trips, we have this idea of just go and see, just go and learn, just go and receive and experience, that maybe in that experiential learning, there could be an opportunity for these things, these seeds to be planted. Another thing I would say is sometimes we have to ask hard questions. I'm familiar with a situation where there's a great change among a very traditional and historic missions board because somebody finally asked at the end of the day, with all of this money and all of these resources and with this high percentage of our church budget that we've put here, what has been the result? What have we seen? What could we say has been, and I hate this term, the return on our investment? And sometimes in asking those hard questions, um, it kind of rebukes itself and we can begin to think of new things by being willing to offer that challenge. And so that's not going to work for everybody, and there may be situations where that's the worst advice possible. But sometimes I think we have to ask those hard questions if we want to see change occur.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Um, skip around. How does the dynamic of the Trinity affect our understanding of mutuality in missions and serving?
That is a wonderful question that answers itself. Dang, I can't believe we didn't bring up the Trinity because that is the model of mutuality.
Mm.
Um, yeah, the Trinity lives and serves itself in the perfect example of what balance and harmony is. And so, yeah, I'm glad somebody brought that in. I don't know who it was, but blessings upon you. Because yeah, the Trinity is our great example of what all these things are.
Yeah, and as much as like I want to try to add to that, it's so beautiful and mysterious and perfect that I don't even want to try to explain how it works except to say yes. Period.
Yes. Well, period. Okay, period. That was the end of the sentence.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. Um, this person also asked, I am not South African, so this is I'm gonna take a stab at it. How do different countries and cultures define and understand mutuality? They gave a South African perspective, has the concept of a word that I will not butcher, but
It's Ubuntu. I've actually
Mm,
heard that before.
yeah.
I am because we are.
Yeah. I think there are, and they all are different. I couldn't name all of them off the top of my head. But yeah, the Ubuntu, as I've heard it before, is a great example of this concept of mutuality and reciprocity and harmony. My experience in East Asia, it was a word called guanxi. Guanxi is this, balance between things. And so, in the society and in the culture, the worst thing was to be in a guanxi debt with somebody else, which means, they paid you or you paid them socially, but you're out of balance. And so mutuality is the only way to create harmony and to create peace and to create good relationships. And so I think it's a good, like in these short-term trips, for example, that you're doing, I think it would be a good thing to ask really inquisitive questions. And one of them could be like, what's your word for this? What are some of your, because helping people or asking people to unpack their own language is a fun game, to say, what's your word for this? What's your concept for this? What's your sometimes your story that you were taught as children, that give these ideas, and those are fun things to explore.
Yeah, in Peru, in the Quechua language, there was a word, ayu, which simply means community, but it was kind of the ultimate way that community was viewed. A kind of perfect community was ayu. And so our church plant, we actually named it the Iglesia de Cristo Congregación Ayu. So the Ayu Church, or the church that's all about like community slash family. It was even hard to define the word, but yeah. So lots of words and lots of cultures that grasp at this mutuality concept.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think we have one in the chat box. I don't want to. miss it. So Bob has here short-term foreign missions are 1,000 times easier than a long-term local engagement in one's hometown. Would you speak to the concepts of mutuality and missions for those who engage with people unlike us here in the US and, for instance, within Knoxville?
Yeah, I love this question. Um, Maybe the simplest way, especially when I think about mutuality and reaching out to and connecting with immigrant populations, you want to do the mutuality thing, invite people into your home, and then allow them to invite you into their home. Do the hospitality thing. I 85% of immigrants have never been invited into the home of in the United States, into the home of someone who was originally from the United States. It's a part of their culture because they come from collectivistic cultures. Their hospitality is everything, and then they come here and and we want to reach them with the good news of Jesus, right? And but we won't show any hospitality. We won't invite. We just expect them to come to church. And when that doesn't work, we're like, well, that didn't work. I know a story about a Pakistani guy who came to the United States for his education. He brought two suitcases. One suitcase was full of his stuff. The other suitcase was full of gifts that he would give to people when they invited him to their homes. He went back home with two full suitcases because nobody he was never in 4 years in the United States, he was never invited into somebody's home. So hospitality really is the mutuality thing, fits the mutuality thing here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got nothing to add to that. It's hospitality. It's, living that out in day-to-day life.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys. I'm getting extra. Hold on, stand by. Another question that got sent to me. If you have thoughts on this, how do you see the future of traditional non-government organizations
Mm.
without the needs of a community? Or like, hold on. I'm seeing the typo in my head. I'm trying to process um what he meant. Hold on. Um, you know what? Pause on that question. We're gonna circle back. I'm going to respond by asking for a different wording on that question.
Yeah.
Next question kind of goes along the lines with Bob's. Somebody, and I think it's a question directed towards me. They were asking in ways they may have in a minority aspect where mutuality didn't work and what were the results of that. Um uh so sometimes there's like I think people's heart posture as you go into place. Um really good intentions, but oftentimes they assume that the people they're going to help cannot help themselves. And we've talked about that a little bit. Um And I do want to emphasize the story you had shared, Aaron, with the man coming with his tools, like cultures being helpful and being in partnership and collectivism is a huge thing. It is the desire to the way people care about sports teams or the way we might now sports is probably like the best example. We're in this camaraderie together. We may not all know each other, but our love for the team alone like brings everybody together. And Eastern concept, not concept, because Eastern world is real. A lot of the Eastern cultures, there's the essence of if in hopes of like I'm working, you're working, I'm grieving, you're grieving.
Mm.
And with the Western mindset, it's like, oh no, it's okay. This is just a me thing. It's like, no, we're hardworking together, we lament together. And I'd say on a even on a, like a biblical aspect, I don't remember the chapter, but in thinking perhaps Luke, but it says go by two and two into a town and give certain instructions on what to do when you get into town. If you don't trust the person you're going into town with, if they don't see you as an equal, you're not allowing for God's image to be reflected in something that they have something to bring to the table. and you've lost this connection as thinking like, I've got us, don't worry, you're a guest, you're a guest, you're a guest. Like the guest wants to be helpful. Um, so I think, yeah, letting people help, letting people be a part because they want to be they want to be on the forefront together, whatever that forefront looks like. Doesn't have to be war, it can be a table, it can be building, um, it can be grieving, but letting people come along for the ride is just a really sweet, and beautiful thing. Um,
Yeah, a quick story I would add to that is when one of the things we figured out in our time in East Asia was, how to host well and how to have people in our homes. And one of the things that was a bit shocking the first couple times it happened to us is we'd have people over, we'd, put on a big meal, try to follow all the rules of how to do this. And then as soon as the meal was over, they would insist on helping us clean up. They would insist on, being a part of cleaning the dishes and putting everything away. And you guys know how this works. You have people over, and there's parts of your house that you clean, and there's parts of your house that you didn't. And one of the areas that we didn't clean was like our kitchen area. And so, as they're coming into our kitchen and kind of invading the space that we weren't planning on showing anyone, thing of like, oh, you're in here and you're washing our dishes and you're seeing where we put things away and how bad our junk drawer is full of junk. And it was this vulnerable thing of in the midst of, being the host, having people invade your vulnerable spaces, but it's kind of like that's how it's got to be. Saying in this place where I'm serving you, you've got to have a chance to serve me. And there's going to be times where that feels weird, and there's going to be time where that feels vulnerable. But it's the way this is done. It's the way we find that balance and harmony. And if we're not willing to be vulnerable, if we're only going to be in a position of strength and in a position of power, um, we're not going to allow that to happen.
awesome. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. Okay.
So I'll just jump in real quick because Bob said that the registration link online is expired. That is a mistake on our side. We were originally going to have book club in Knoxville last night, and it got pushed to this upcoming Monday night next week. So Bob, I will send out a follow-up email tomorrow to all of you guys, and I'll make sure that that updated registration link is available so you can come join us for the next book club. Sorry, Ashley.
Oh, you're good. You're good. Okay. For the sake of time, respecting people's time, whether it be dinner or bed, this will be the last question. Clarify for what I was trying to say before. So if the community no longer presents a clear need, what then becomes, I guess, what then becomes the purpose?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Matt, I'll let you start it out.
Is this in the context of NGOs?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Aaron, I don't feel real qualified to talk about NGOs. I'll let you go first.
Okay. I think when it comes to missional strategy, when it comes to this idea of being where you don't belong, you're crossing a culture, you're going into someone else's space, you're in a place of not your kind and not your people and not your culture, that we forget that this is always just going to be a season. There's always going to be a time where we begin to be a part of something. And then if that goes well, we're not going to be needed anymore, that season's going to end. And so much of what I think is good missional strategy is a bit of a short-term mindset of let's be a part of this thing God has called us to be. And if God blesses it, the need will be met. And so then it's time for us to say, okay, let's be again in partnership, in equality with our partners here. Say, is this time for us then to pack up and go because the job's been done? Or is it time for us to shift to something else because there's a new need that arises? But to always have that short-term mindset of, this is only going to be for a time and space and season. And there could be a time where this is ended, and that's a win. That's a good thing. Because it's kind of, whatever job it was, job done kind of thing, that's a good point to get to.
Yeah, I think we could argue from a biblical perspective, though I'm all about long term. People staying on the field a long time. Paul never really stayed anywhere that
Yeah.
long. He was constantly on the move, raising up leaders, equipping leaders, and then he'd move on. And so, longest on his missionary journeys, the longest he stayed was Ephesus for 3 years. So he's
Yep.
constantly on the move, raising up leaders, and then recognizing that there were other things he could do elsewhere.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Morgan, yes, love your comment. Working from an asset-based rather than a needs-based approach is the healthiest way to partner. Last thing I will share, we got the Mutuality Lab. Scan that QR code if you would like to know more. But what I will say is this wonderful lady pictured here, Mektis Hadis, Ethiopian American. She moved to the States in the early 2000s, if I recall correctly. But she has intentionally, with a really good team, tried to process what is it like to have healthy mutual relationships with others and re-imaging Christian missions with a lens of mutuality and justice and cultural humility. So a really great resource. She's got videos and kind of curriculum that you can go through by yourself or perhaps with others for great conversation and accountability. But she has a big heart to have God's kingdom do partnership really well. So definitely check out that QR code. Abby also dropped a link as well. Um, but yeah, thank you guys all so much for being here with us. And like Abby mentioned before, we have it recorded. So if you have to do a recap, we will send that out. Um, Not we. Abby will send that out, if I'm being fully honest. Abby will send it out to you guys so you can do a recap as you see fit. Um, Abby, is there anything else before I
I don't think so. I just want to, yeah, say thank you again for joining. And we're so grateful for you guys. We're glad to see some of your faces, and we'll look forward to having you at our next webinar, which we don't know the date of yet, but we'll let you know when we do and when we know that topic and the speaker and everything. So,
Yeah.
all right. Thank you guys. Have a good evening.
Yes, thank you all so
Thanks,
much.
Matt and Aaron.